So the other day I'm browsing through YouTube as I often do, and I decided to click on Better Ideas channel, which is run by a guy called Joey. And what I found when I clicked on Joey's channel was a very interesting trend in the way that he titles his videos. Let me read you some of his titles and you can tell me if you spot any patterns. How to be miserable for the rest of your life. Why your ego is ruining your life. Why it's so hard to be happy. Why you're always tired. Why self-improvement is ruining your life. Why overstimulation is ruining your life. How the comfort zone is ruining your life. Joey, it seems, loves to put this suffix onto his videos, ruining your life, and if he doesn't, he still often tries to find a negative spin to a lot of the titles of his videos. So it made me think, why has Joey adopted this tactic? Why has he gone with this negative spin on so many of his videos, when if you actually watch the content of those videos, they're not actually overly negative. In fact, he gives a lot of really good advice about self-improvement and how to be more productive. Well, my theory is that he realized that if he puts a negative spin on his videos, he probably gets a lot more views. And from a behavioral science point of view, this makes a lot of sense, because in behavioral science, we have something called the negativity bias, which is what I want to talk about in today's video. So in today's video, I'm going to try and answer the questions: what is negativity bias? Why do we have it? Why is it really smart that Joey titles his videos this way? And also, how can you embrace the negativity bias and use it to your own advantage? Alright, let's get started, shall we? Okay, first off, what is negativity bias? Negativity bias is a really well-established idea in psychology that basically says that people pay more attention to negative information than positive information. From an evolutionary point of view, this makes a lot of sense. When it comes to surviving in the wild, negative information is way more important for us to pay attention to. It's way more important for us to pay attention to the saber-toothed tiger that might jump out at us than to be distracted by some pretty flowers somewhere else. Negative information has a much greater impact on our survival than positive ones. And so because of this reason, our brains have evolved to pay attention to negative information much more strongly than positive ones. And this has ramifications for all kinds of different areas of your life. For example, research shows that negative information is actually more memorable than positive information. Secondly, negative information has even been shown to be more believable than truthful information. It seems that because we know that people are going to be paying attention to negative information, that if you share negative information, people deem that information as being more trustworthy and believable. And this idea has been well understood by media outlets for a long time. You may have heard of the phrase, if it bleeds, it leads. That's talking about how negative news tends to get more attention than positive news. Because of this negativity bias and the fact that people pay way more attention to negative information than positive information, journalists have a really strong incentive to put out negative news because they know that it's going to get more clicks, more reads, more shares than positive news. And you don't need me to tell you that your local news coverage is probably 90% negative. And so what Joey from Better Ideas is basically doing is using negativity bias in the same way. Because if you think about the topic of his videos, he could very easily make it either a positive or a negative spin, but by making it a negative spin, he's probably getting way more attention than if he puts the positive spin. For example, rather than call his video "How the Comfort Zone is Ruining Your Life," he could say "How I Got Out of the Comfort Zone and Tried New Things." Or rather than call his video "Why You're Always Tired," he could have said "How I Learned to Be More Alert and Awake." But these positive spins on the same topic aren't as catchy as the negative ones. The negative ones are likely to get way more attention and therefore get more views. So is negativity bias a problem? Should we be afraid of it, and should we think of it as a flaw in human judgment? Well, I wouldn't say so. There's no point in getting disparaged about the fact that we have negativity bias. Instead, we're better off embracing it and thinking about how we can use negativity bias to our own advantages. For example, if you're designing something that you want people to pay attention to, then think about, can you give this a negative spin? Because people are more likely to pay attention to it that way, and that can help you develop your business or your brand. But I think that an even better way to apply negativity bias in a positive way to your life is to actually embrace your flaws. Because everybody is flawed, everybody has negative traits, but we often like to hide them away and not show them off to our peers. It makes us feel vulnerable and it makes us feel scared. But research shows that flawed heroes are actually more endearing than perfect ones. Superman without kryptonite is an incredibly boring character because he has no weakness. Weaknesses is actually what makes people relatable, and that's what makes them like you more. I think that's also something that Joey is doing in his thumbnails, because he often shows himself as being susceptible to the same vices as all the rest of us. He shows us in his thumbnails that he's also tired all the time, that he's also always on his phone, that he's also procrastinating, and that kind of makes him more of a likable and relatable character. Another example of this I can think of is Casey Neistat, who's one of the most well-respected YouTubers on the platform. Casey Neistat's imperfect and chaotic style to vlogging is actually what makes him more relatable. The fact that he uses some shaky handheld footage, the fact that his footage isn't perfectly color graded, it actually makes him more relatable as a creator. In a way, you can think that he's perfected imperfection, and that isn't a weakness of his channel, that's actually a strength because it makes him just seem so authentic. And outside of the world of YouTube, we also see this in the world of business and branding too. Brands that are bold enough to embrace their flaws are actually some of the most successful. For example, think about Marmite's slogan, you either love it or you hate it. They're basically admitting that a large portion of people will hate their product. Now that's a very brave thing for any company to say about their product, but by being so upfront about it, it makes the people who love Marmite really love it that much more. Another example from the world of branding would be Avis. Avis is a car rental company that says, we're number 2, so we try harder. This embracing of the fact that Avis isn't number 1 actually makes them seem more honest as a company. It seems that in the world of branding and YouTube, if you can learn to embrace your flaws and be open about them, it can actually make you more endearing and get people to pay more attention to you. These negative traits make people pay more attention to you. Now this is a hard tactic to get right. Self-deprecating humor can go from funny to just sad really quickly. One clue about how to do this really well comes from a study on products with slight blemishes to them. What they found in this study was that products that had small imperfections peripheral to the core function of the product were actually seen more favorably than perfect products. In other words, the small tarnishes that didn't affect the core function of the product actually made people like the product more. And so it seems to me that we can take the lessons from that study and apply it to our own lives. If we're able to poke fun at ourselves for things that aren't core to our personality and our identity, then that can actually make us more endearing. I like to think about Conan O'Brien, who's one of my favorite comedians, who always makes fun of the fact that he's this tall and gangly guy. The fact that he's able to poke fun at himself for being tall and gangly helps us to like him more, because that's not core to who he is. His core identity is as a comedian, as a funny person, so he's not poking fun at the fact that his jokes aren't landing. That's just kind of sad. Instead, he pokes fun at other things, and that makes us like him more. Now, being self-deprecating as an individual or as a brand is a really hard sell. It involves being vulnerable, and that's a scary place for a lot of people, but that's also the exact reason why it's so effective. The fact that it's so rare and the fact that we have this negativity bias, this attenuation to negative information, the fact that some of us can own up to our negative traits actually makes us more endearing. Instead, the way that I like to think about it is a reframing of perfectionism. So many of us want to be perfect in whatever domain we're trying to pursue in life, but actually perfectionism isn't the right way to go about it. Flaws make us more endearing, they make us more likable. So embrace your flaws, take the pressure off yourself to be perfect, because it makes you more human and it makes people like you more. Okay, thank you guys so much for watching, give me a like if you enjoyed today's video, and I will see you next week. Bye bye. You may have heard of the news phrase, if it bleeds, it leads. You may have heard of the phrase, if it bleeds, it leads, which is